I just finished an insanely exciting chapter. It's a whirlwind of strategic genius. The story kicks off with the Han tribe gearing up for a big battle at Fuma Pass. They've got all these makeshift weapons like the ballista, and the preparations are in full swing. But then the cannibals throw a curveball. They cross the river and head for the dark forest for food, completely derailing the original battle plan. The Han tribe cavalry then pull off some seriously cool tactics. They harass the cannibals, using sling stones and even beggar version incendiary bombs to drive them crazy. They lead the cannibals on a wild chase, luring them towards Fuma Pass. It's a masterclass in manipulation. What I love most is how the tribe's leader thinks on their feet, constantly adapting the plan. It shows that in a fight, being flexible is just as important as having brute force. Now, with the cannibals approaching Fuma Pass, and the appearance of those terrifying dinosaur elephants, I'm on the edge of my seat. I can't wait to see how the Han tribe will deal with this new threat. Will they be able to capture more prisoners and turn the tide of the battle? There are so many questions left unanswered, and I'm dying to find out what happens next. The north gate of Fumigan was wide open. Hordes of black-clad enemies followed behind the man, eating giant apes pouring in like a crowd rushing to a market, frantically chasing the few hundred of your men who were fleeing for their lives. Normally, with the speed of those giant apes, it would be a matter of minutes to catch up with your men. But by a stroke of luck, the welcome gift you had prepared in advance, clouds of lime powder, instantly blinded these beasts. The blinded giant apes lost all sense of reason and started beating up their own comrades, throwing the charging formation into chaos like a boiling pot of porridge, and instead became a burden to the pursuing troops. Taking advantage of this precious opportunity of the enemy's infighting, Sietu and his men, who had originally prepared to fight to the death in the Barbican, miraculously broke through the south gate and rushed out. When the men guarding the south gate saw the approaching people, they were overjoyed and shouted at the top of their voices, "Close the gate! Hurry! The enemy is coming! The door bolts! Insert all 3 of them! Sandbags! Where are the sandbags? Quick! Pile them behind the door!" A team leader shouted until his face was red and his neck was thick, excited and nervous, for fear that a single second of delay would ruin your plan of trapping the dog behind closed doors. Bang! The 2 heavy wooden doors finally closed. Almost at the same time, those totem warriors with strange markings on their bodies also broke through the blockade of the friendly giant apes and rushed to the south gate, the fastest, running. 50 or 60 men crashed into the gate with a loud bang. The gate shook 3 times, and then there was no more movement. Little did they know that behind the door, the few hundred men who had just run out were packed like sardines, using their bodies to reinforce the city gate. Immediately after, another team responsible for the gate defense hurriedly dropped the 3 solid wood door bolts as thick as an adult's thigh with a click-click-click sound. And that was not all. Hundreds of sandbags were quickly brought and piled up behind the door in a rush. Now, not to mention people, even if dozens of giant apes came together to have a door-ramming party. They wouldn't be able to budge it an inch. Just as the situation at the south gate was under control, the fighting at the north gate was still intense, of course mainly on the enemy's side. You had a wonderful plan, to trap all the enemies in this Barbican and wipe them out in one fell swoop. But reality was a bit harsh. The vanguard giant apes were tricked by you and were completely incapacitated. But when the follow-up enemy troops saw the city gate wide open and your men fleeing in panic, they thought they had struck gold and rushed in, howling, straight towards your imagined lair. As a result, when they reached the end, they were stunned. Where was the easy breakthrough they had imagined? Where were the vulnerable defenders? There was nothing. In front of them was a city wall and gate that were taller and thicker than those of Hanyang City. What the hell? Was this another wall? The script of, "I'm just sitting here watching you attack, but you just can't hit me," was playing out again. How could they fight like this? Logically, at this time, your men on the city wall should have shot arrows at them. But strangely, there, was complete silence on the city wall. Your men seemed to have all gone offline. Except for struggling to close the door, there was no other movement. The charging totem warriors were completely confused. The door couldn't be opened, and the enemy wasn't attacking me. So what was I standing here for? To cosplay as a door? God? Should I retreat? Many people started to have second thoughts, and began to move back carefully, their eyes fixed on the city wall for fear that you would suddenly shoot a hidden arrow. But as they tried to retreat, their clueless comrades behind were still charging forward. One wave wanted to retreat, and the other wave wanted to advance, and the two groups collided, causing a chaotic scene. The ones who wanted to retreat saw that there were still a steady stream of brothers behind them. Well, they thought, forget it. Let's have a meeting on the spot to figure out how to climb the wall. At the same time, outside the north gate of the Barbican, most of the enemies had fled, leaving only about 100 men surrounding the two huge beasts, the Deinotheriums, still confronting you on the city wall. They first climbed onto the backs of the elephants, trying to shoot arrows and throw stones at the city wall. But your men had already learned their lesson. They all crouched behind the battlements, holding wooden shields to cover themselves tightly, not even showing a hair. This trick didn't work, so they came up with another idea. Use the Deinotheriums as living ladders and climb up directly. The idea was good, but reality was cruel. One Deinotherium stood while the other knelt down beside it, trying to form a two-tiered step. But this was something only the giant apes with their long legs could manage. The Deinotheriums were already tall, and with the addition of the several-meter-high city wall, the height difference of each step made the totem warriors, with an average height of about 1.7 meters, sigh in despair at the sight of the wall. Damn it, they couldn't even climb up. How could they fight? It was all the fault of those blind red-haired monsters, the giant apes. If their eyesight had been good, they would have long since charged up the city wall and wreaked havoc. Now they were useless, directly eliminated by your lime powder attack. What could you expect from a bunch of blind creatures? Undaunted by repeated failures, the totem warriors came up with a third plan. Let the beast whisperer in the tribe, who could communicate with the Deinotheriums, direct the elephants to pick up the warriors with their long trunks and airdrop them directly onto the city wall. If they didn't have the height, they would use their trunks. Standing on the city wall, you looked at this strange siege method with a face like the Metro grandpa looking at phoned JPG expression. Could it be done like this? A wicked smile curled up on your lips. You told your men to throw away their spears and replace them with wooden sticks. They crouched behind the battlements, ready to welcome these airborne troops. In the blink of an eye, the two Deinotheriums really picked up two men with their trunks and flung them up with a whoosh. However, the moment they came up, these two guys regretted it. They were horrified to find that they were the only two who had come up, and on the city wall, there was a black mass of people. There were at least 800 or more. The two men thought to themselves, what are we doing? Up here? Are we here to offer ourselves as targets too? Chow Min Chow. Two brothers, go! Capture these two fools alive! Ha 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 ha! At your command, before the two unlucky guys could even stand firm, dozens of men rushed up from all directions, and the wooden sticks in their hands rained down. After a beating, the two men were left half dead, and then they were quickly tied up like dumplings and thrown into the corner to fend for themselves. This made your men on the city wall excited. They might be afraid of fighting, but this kind of pleasure of dozens of people beating up two was simply too good. Even some of the originally timid recruits found the fun of defending their homeland in it. Unfortunately, due to the angle, the people below the wall could only hear the shouts from above and couldn't see the specific situation. When they saw that, hey, the men had been successfully sent up. The dawn of victory was just around the corner. So they cheerfully sent up two more packages. As expected, they were immediately overwhelmed by the ocean of people's war as soon as they landed, and even their screams couldn't be heard clearly. The people below weren't stupid either. 4 men had been sent up, but there was no big commotion. They gradually realized that something was wrong. Sending people up seemed a bit slow, and if there were too few people, it would be like throwing meat buns at a dog. Although they didn't know exactly how many people were up there must be a lot. So they changed their position and asked the 2 Dinotheriums to speed up the delivery frequency, trying to send up 7 or 8 men a minute. But this speed was like tickling to your 800 plus men on the city wall. Even more ridiculously, the Dinotheriums couldn't see the situation on the wall, and the way they picked up the men was all over the place. When they felt that it was about the right height, they would loosen their trunks and throw them. As a result, most of the warriors were still in a daze when they were thrown up. Before they could even stand firm, they were pressed to the ground by your men like little chicks and tied up. The screams finally reached the people below, clearly sending a clear message. Stop sending people. There are too many people up there. Sending them up is just a waste. After trying 3 plans and losing dozens of men in vain, the enemies below were finally completely enraged. Isn't it just a damn wall? I don't have to climb it, okay? Watch me smash it down. The battle plan changed again. The Beast Whisperer received new orders. Let these 2 big guys ram the wall. The next moment, the dull, pounding sound of dong, dong, dong came, and the entire city wall trembled. Many of your men were shaken off their feet and sat down on the top of the wall, their faces pale. If this rammed earth wall collapsed, there would be those 2 prehistoric beasts below. Just thinking about being stepped on by them made one's heart tighten. Panic began to spread, but you, as the leader, were as steady as an old dog. Your brows furrowed slightly, but you weren't afraid. For one thing, you had confidence in this city wall. When the wall was built, it wasn't just rammed earth. It also had plant ash, lime, and charcoal added to it. Although it wasn't luxurious enough to use glutinous rice juice, it could be considered a low-budget version of 3-ingredient soil, with a hardness comparable to that of primary-grade cement. It wasn't that easy to knock down. Secondly, even if there was danger, you had a way to deal with these 2 big guys. Don't panic. Listen to me, you said in a deep voice. Those 2 elephants haven't heard our war drums. Drummers, beat the drums hard. Scare them. Everyone else, find long bamboo poles, tie torches to them, dip them in oil and light them. Burn their noses and butts. As long as it's a wild animal, there's nothing that isn't afraid of fire and loud noises. Your thoughts were clear, and your orders were decisive. Everyone thought right. They had been so scared by those big guys just now that they had forgotten that no matter how big they were still just animals. They might be nervous when dealing with enemies, but when it came to dealing with wild animals, everyone here was an experienced old hunter. That's right, they were just 2 elephants. What was there to be afraid of? The morale instantly picked up. The deafening sound of the drums, dong, 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 rang out, as dense as if it was performing CPR on the earth. At the same time, one super torch after another, temporarily lengthened, was lit and extended down from the city wall, directly poking at the sensitive parts of the Dinotheriums. 1, 2, a dozen. Flame, expelling formation was formed. The Dinotheriums had thick skin, but they couldn't stand the burning sensation. They were in pain and scared, and they backed away again and again. No matter how much the Beast Whisperer shouted and urged, they just wouldn't go near the city wall again. In their panic, they even trampled to death a few unlucky comrades. Chief, why don't we just shoot them with fire, arrows, kill them and be done with it? A new recruit couldn't help, but suggest you gave him a cold look and said coldly, I want them alive. Well, with the enemy's last trump cards, the 2 Dinotheriums also successfully persuaded to retreat by you. The farce at the north gate of Fumigan should come to an end. All those who were supposed to enter the Barbican had come in. Outside the city, there were only the 2 frightened elephants and 60 or 70 defeated soldiers left. They couldn't cause any more trouble. You immediately gave the order, Close the north gate. The winches and pulleys on the tower made a click, click, click sound. The huge hanging door slowly descended. The door bolt was then inserted. At this point, all the exits of the Barbican were completely sealed off. Let's do the math. Except for the 500 or 600 people who were either suffocated or lost in the dark forest, plus the few dozen people who had just run away with the elephants. Nearly 3,000 people from the cannibal tribe had come this time. Now, more than 2,000 of them were firmly locked in this big jar. As for their fate, they would probably be sent to mine, build roads, or continue building the city. As the price for invading your Han tribe, they would have to atone for their sins with the labor of their remaining lives, if they had any left. Just as the situation at Fumigan was settled, 2 Azuka giant eagles soared into the sky, carrying your latest orders, and headed towards the direction of the big tree in Luoyang County and Yuye, who was on standby upstream of the Ru River. The good show had just begun. A few hours later, the setting sun lazily hung on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the land. Just then, your messengers, 2 majestic Azuka giant eagles, delivered your latest orders to Dashu and Yuye respectively. Dashu's task: lead a group of people to patrol the dark forest and wipe out those scattered remnants of the cannibal tribe. When they find a corpse, they should bury it on the spot and count the number of people, both the living and the dead, to make sure no one escapes. You had full confidence in Dashu for this task. That forest used to be the ancestral home of the tree tribe, and they knew it like the back of their hand. It was a perfect fit for them. Yuye's task: take Ruru and Huishan, select 100 cavalrymen, and set off from the banks of the Ru River to chase in the northeast direction. The targets were those dozens of fleeing totem warriors and those 2 precious treasures, adult dinotheriums. Whether the people were dead or alive didn't matter, but those 2 elephants had to be captured alive. Upon receiving the orders, the 2 of them didn't hesitate for a moment. They immediately assembled their troops and set out, striving to finish this business as quickly as possible. Early the next morning, several more express deliveries were sent by giant eagles to various parts of the Han tribe. The content was straightforward. First, the good news: we've won the battle. Second, lift the all-round alert. Everyone should go about their business, settle down as soon as possible, open up wasteland for farming, build houses and cities, and focus on economic development. Other places were at peace, but in the Barbican of Fumigan, a unique, internal strife was taking place. It wasn't your men fighting the enemy, but the more than 2,000 totem warriors having a cordial exchange with the 35 blind giant apes. Yesterday afternoon, as soon as the north and south gates of the Barbican closed with a bang, the totem warriors inside belatedly realized something was wrong. The canyon was quite wide, but on both sides were smooth cliffs. Trying to climb up, it was more realistic to dream about it. At both ends of the canyon, you had blocked them tightly with 2 city walls more than 10 meters high. In the middle area, there was nothing but wild grass. There was not only no food but also no water to drink. Of course, if they had the skill of making fire to get water from wood, they might be able to dig a well. But this was obviously beyond their understanding. Now, these guys were completely panicked. They finally figured it out. Why was this attack so smooth? Why did the people on the city wall put up only a token resistance and then let them in? Why, when they reached the second wall, did the enemy just block the door and not even shoot? An arrow? This script was wrong. It was completely different from what the brothers who had run back last time said. Where were those burly men in the legend, holding big shields, wearing black-scale armor, and brandishing magical weapons that could cut off a head with one blow? Where were those archers with an incredibly long range? Why hadn't they seen any of them? It turned out, the real intention of your Han tribe was to lock them up here and let them starve and thirst to death? At the thought of this possibility, nearly 2,000 totem warriors were instantly in an uproar. They were not afraid of death, Nor were they afraid of fighting, but to be starved and thirsted to death so miserably. That was absolutely unacceptable. Besides, they were the cannibal tribe. In their dictionary, how could the word starve to death be allowed? The answer, of course, was impossible. The feeling of hunger crept up like a poisonous snake. Countless people clenched their weapons and their eyes began to glow green. Everyone around them looked like walking protein, but they weren't completely stupid either. Killing each other? There were only so many of them. After killing each other, they wouldn't be able to survive for long either. It was better to unite against a common enemy first and deal with those big-sized, big-eating but currently useless blind giant apes. There were a full 35 of them. Killing them, the meat, would be enough for everyone to last for several days. Thus, an internal conflict full of contradictions yet somehow logical began with great fanfare. And the mastermind behind all this, that was you. At the moment, you were leisurely holding a warm bowl of rice, sitting on the city wall with several hundred of your subordinates watching the scene with great interest, as if watching a live broadcast. Go on, attack it. Damn it, these cowards. Where was that fierce look when they were fighting us just now? Why are they trembling when they meet the red-haired monsters? It's easy for you to say. If you're so brave, why don't you go? I bet you'd be a coward too. Look, they threw a spear. It hit. It knocked one down. That guy can't get up. Damn it, look over there. That red-haired monster has 2 spears stuck in its body, and it's still running really fast. Goodness, oh. It tore that person in half with its bare hands. This strength, shit. Ugh. A soldier suddenly covered his mouth. I don't know why, but looking at that guy's death scene, I suddenly feel a bit nauseous. Have I not hunted for too long and can't stand this anymore? Now that you mention it, I also feel a bit sick. Maybe I've eaten too much white rice and my stomach has become more delicate. Ah, are you two disgusting? Look over there, those 3. Red-haired monsters have learned to be smart and know how to stick together. They even grabbed a few corpses and used them as meteor hammers. The people around them can't do anything to them at all. The people around said they were disgusted, but their eyes were very honest. They stared intently at the exciting scene. Below, for fear of missing any drama, in the direction the soldier pointed, 3 blood-soaked giant apes huddled back to back. Several short spears were stuck in their bodies, and they were panting heavily. Each of them held 1 or 2 pieces of incomplete corpses in their hands. Whenever they heard a sound in a certain direction, they would suddenly swing the corpse weapons in a circle. Then they retreated to catch their breath. The totem warriors surrounding them weren't stupid either. Seeing that the giant apes were severely injured, they simply surrounded them without attacking, planning to play a war of attrition and wear them out until they died. Some people wanted to throw more spears, but there were only a few spears. Once thrown, they would be gone. In this hellish place, who dared to casually throw away their life-saving weapons? In case they lost their weapons, they might become someone else's reserve food the next second. As a result, the situation fell into a strange stalemate. Unfortunately, although the giant apes were invincible in one-on-one combat, from the moment they were blinded by your quicklime, their fate was already sealed. The giant apes, like a spent arrow, didn't wait for a miracle and didn't hold on long. Under the siege, mainly through attrition, of nearly 2,000 people, they quickly fell one after another. With the last giant ape crashing to the ground, the atmosphere on the scene didn't ease but became even more tense. A few minutes later, no one knew which hothead made the first move. In order to fight for the precious giant ape corpses, that is, food, the totem warriors below once again fell into a chaotic battle. Finally, after paying the price of over 120 lives, the people who had snatched food temporarily restored a fragile peace. When would the next conflict break out? Probably the moment they finished gnawing on the giant ape jerky in their hands. Sitting on the city wall, you looked at the corpses lying in all directions below. Your brows furrowed deeper and deeper, and you finally realized a serious problem. Something's not right. You slapped your thigh suddenly. Who the hell allowed you to die? I went to so much trouble to get living captives. You idiots are killing each other. If you all die, who am I going to get to build roads and mine? This is really... You cursed yourself for being stupid and actually forgetting the most crucial point of a siege battle. You couldn't push the enemy to a dead end. You had to give them some hope, make them feel that there was still a way out, which was what was often said in military strategy as leaving one side unblocked when besieging on three sides. Given the current terrain, it was impossible to leave one side unblocked as both ends were blocked. However, you quickly came up with a flexible solution, a clever plan that could achieve a similar effect and was more conducive to reaping the captives in the future. So, a new battle plan was quickly conveyed to every soldier on the city wall. After hearing your plan, several hundred guards immediately perked up and cheered excitedly. After all, no matter how interesting the drama was, it would get boring if you watched it all the time. They were definitely more than happy that the chief had a way to end this farce earlier. A sudden inspiration struck you, and you came up with a brilliant, sinister idea to open a gap in the encirclement. Give those totem warriors inside a glimmer of hope. Of course, the gap couldn't be too big. You had to control the flow, making them line up and crawl out one by one. It was just like when you used to let the cows out of the pen in your hometown. There had to be some order. So, directly opening the city gate was definitely not an option. The south gate was blocked tightly, and it would be too much trouble to open it again. The north gate was a hanging gate. If you lifted it just a little, then you wouldn't be able to control the number of people coming out. There would be a huge rush of them. Finally, you made a decision. Dig a tunnel. Dig right under the city wall. Wanted to control the number of people? Easy. Just dig the tunnel small, with a diameter just enough for one person to crawl through. You thought when people just crawled out of the hole, they would be dizzy and disoriented, and their hands and feet wouldn't be nimble enough to resist. And that time, just arrange a few strong men at the entrance of the tunnel. As soon as one person came out, they would pin him down, and if two came out, they would pin down both of them. Perfect. Once the plan was finalized, you got to work right away. You immediately sent the warriors down the city wall along the ladders. The easy engineering shovels that had been distributed as temporary weapons before now came in handy. They were the perfect tools for digging. Some people were digging laboriously at the front, while others were carrying the soil in baskets behind. Under the more than 600-meter-long North City wall, 10 tunnels were being dug simultaneously. The tunnels didn't need to be too long. Just over 10 meters would do. After all, the bottom of the city wall was only 10 meters wide, which was enough to connect the inside and the outside. While they were digging vigorously here, you sent an urgent task to Hanyang City. First, prepare a large number of ropes. They were essential for tying up people. Second, prepare a large amount of medicine for treating external injuries to take care of the wounded. Third, and most importantly, get some specialties. That is, the blue poisonous mushrooms that the mushroom tribe had presented before. Taking them internally could cause hallucinations. Applying them externally could numb the nerves. They were all natural and had no side effects. Well, probably. Upon receiving the order, the magistrate of Hanyang County looked at your list and a question mark slowly appeared on his forehead. The first two items were easy to understand. Hadn't they just reported the victory a few days ago? The ropes were surely for tying up the captives, and the medicine for injuries was reasonable since there were always casualties in battles. But these poisonous mushrooms... What did you need so many things with an anesthetic effect for? To treat the captives' injuries? It couldn't possibly require that many, could it? Did the chief have some special hobby? The magistrate shook his head, not daring to think too deeply. Even if he couldn't figure out the chief's order, he had to carry it out first. After finishing it, he probably wouldn't dare to ask either. Anyway, he would eventually find out where the medicine was used. Unfortunately, magistrate, you were still too naive. These good things weren't prepared for your own people at all. They were all for the soon-to-be acquired new employees. The captives. You had no doubt that you would definitely capture the captives. But what then? There were more than 2,000 energetic totem warriors. How could you make them obediently work for you? This was the real technical part. Before, you had tried using shackles to restrict their freedom. But now that the tribe had started minting bronze coins, using precious bronze to make shackles, the cost was too high, and you couldn't gather 2,000 pairs in a short time either. Later, you tried the policy of appeasement. Bah! It was actually the starvation treatment. You starved the captives half to death and then dispersed them to various construction sites, with people strictly guarding them. And what was the result? There were huge hidden dangers. People ran away every now and then. Catch them back, execute them in public, and hang their bodies as a warning. Only after making an example of them did the remaining ones gradually accept their fate. After all, working for the Han tribe wouldn't starve them to death, just that they had no freedom. But this time there were simply too many captives, more than 2,000 of them. The old methods didn't work. So you had an idea and came up with a new method full of humanistic care, cutting off their big toes. Fingers and toes are all quite important to people. The punishment of cutting off fingers has existed since ancient times, and you had also heard about it to some extent. For example, in a certain neighboring island country, during the shogunate period, samurais were punished by cutting off their little fingers. The little finger seemed useless, but without it, a samurai couldn't hold a katana tightly, and it would fly out with a touch. Basically, the samurai's career was over, second only to seppuku. The thumb was even more crucial. Without it, the action of grasping would be impossible, which was even worse than cutting off the little finger. Of course, you weren't that cruel, mainly because you were reluctant. If you cut off their fingers, how could they carry bricks and build walls for you? So your target was their big toes. When people walk or run, the big toe plays a crucial role in gripping the ground and providing support. Cut off the big toe, and walking wouldn't be a big problem, but the posture might be a bit strange. But trying to run? It would be impossible. For the rest of their lives, their movement speed would be permanently restricted to the turtle speed mode. Your goal was clear: to limit their mobility. In this way, even if the slaves who had been punished still had the intention to run away, they definitely couldn't. Catch them back? Make them work twice as hard. As for the survival rate of this amputation operation, you stroked your chin and said that you didn't care at all. Slaves, after all, weren't considered people. If they died, it was just their bad luck. They could only blame themselves for being born into the wrong family, following the wrong leader, and choosing the wrong side. 3 days later, the things you wanted were gradually transported to Fumigan, and on that night, under the cover of darkness, the 10 tunnels under the North City wall were quietly connected. The entrance of the tunnel was right next to the city wall, and since it was dug through at night, the totem warriors inside the city, who were so hungry that they saw stars and so thirsty that their throats were parched, didn't notice anything unusual at all. Hey, this was exactly what you wanted. Early the next morning, just as the food of the city guards inside the city was completely exhausted and they were on the verge of a mental and physical breakdown, bang, 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 bang. Bang, bang. A deafening drumbeat suddenly came from the North City wall. Whoosh! The eyes of everyone in the city were drawn to it. Then they saw a scene that they would never forget for the rest of their lives. Under the tall, despairing, yellowish, brown city wall, there were actually a few white sheep. Those fluffy, round white figures stood out particularly against the backdrop of the yellowish, brown city wall and the green grass. They were eating grass and running around. In an instant, countless totem warriors' minds went buzz. It wasn't that they were thinking, "I'm hungry, there's meat to eat," but rather, where the hell did these sheep come from? In the past few days, they had almost licked the city wall clean, but they hadn't found even a crack. That thought that had almost been completely buried by despair grew wild like weeds again, and quickly occupied the high ground of their minds. Escape! Escape from this hell! The next moment, seeing those fat sheep, countless totem warriors, their eyes glowing green with hunger, squeezed out their last bit of strength and took off running. The huge crowd kicked up clouds of dust. The warriors who were far away and had poor eyesight didn't even see the sheep. They just saw the large group of people rushing towards the North City gate like crazy, and immediately a thought flashed in their minds. Is the gate open? Whether it was true or not, they had to find a reason to charge. So more people started running with all their might. If they were a step slower, they might miss the chance to escape. Danger? The possibility of dying. It was still better than starving to the point of killing each other. Dying on the way of charging was at least being a hero. Charge! The first wave of people rushed to the bottom of the North City wall menacingly. Those unlucky sheep were scared out of their wits and scurried around. One or two of them with some intelligence actually followed the way they came, and plop jumped into the hole at the foot of the wall, and then there was nothing more to it. This scene didn't disappoint the totem warriors behind, but made them overjoyed. The sheep ran out through the hole? This was simply a godsend. If the city gate was wide open, they would still wonder, what was the enemy's intention? Was it a trap? But a hole. In their simple understanding, who would dig a hole? Under the city wall for no reason? It definitely wasn't done by the city guards. Even if they wanted to dig, why dig here? It was obvious that they were letting them go. Thinking of this, the warriors didn't hesitate anymore. The guy in the front plunged into the hole and groped forward, hunched over. The hole wasn't straight. There were vertical shafts at both ends, not very deep, just about the height of a person. You had to squat down to go down, and then move forward for about 6 or 7 meters, and then turn a slanting bend. The bend was even narrower, and you could only crawl on your knees for another 6 or 7 meters. But the good news was that not far ahead, there was light. Sunlight leaked down from above, and judging by the direction, it was obviously another vertical shaft. The exit! I've found the exit! Ha 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 ha! The leading warrior was so excited that he seemed to be fully restored to life on the spot and crawled forward frantically with his hands and feet. Finally, he reached the bottom of the vertical shaft and stood up straight. The vertical shaft outside was deeper than the one inside, about 2.5 to 2.6 meters. Standing at the bottom, you couldn't see the situation on the ground at all. But for these athletes, this height was nothing. With a light jump, they could grab the edge of the wellhead. Getting out was a piece of cake. This guy thought the same way. The entrance of the hole was too narrow and the weapons were in the way. He first threw his stone axe and short spear up, then took a deep breath, raised his arms high, and jumped up on the spot. With a slap, he firmly grabbed the edge of the well. Unfortunately, he hadn't drunk water for 2 or 3 days, and he had been running and crawling just now. His physical strength had already been exhausted. This final climb obviously lacked the strength to continue, and he was on the verge of falling. Just then, above the wellhead, 2 big hands suddenly reached out and firmly grabbed his wrists, pulling him up with a strong tug. The warrior who was pulled up was instantly filled with tears of gratitude. My kin, my savior. This was simply the kindness of giving me a new life. Which hero extended a helping hand in this moment of crisis? Thank you so much. When I get up, I must kowtow 18 times to you, loudly. What the hell? Who are you guys? What do you want? Let me go. Next to the entrance of the hole, the people of your tribe who had already been lying in. Wait. When they saw the hand reaching up from below, smiled secretly. Success. The chief's plan was brilliant. Immediately, in pairs of 2, one person grabbed one hand and unceremoniously pulled the unlucky guy up. Don't talk when you pull him. Up. Twist his hands behind his back and press him to the ground. Then, amidst a series of friendly chuckles, the full set of binding play was carried out. Stuff his mouth, tie his hands, bind his feet, and add a loving little fist gently, greeting the back of his head. That guy still wanted to shout for help, but his mouth was already stuffed tightly with dry grass. His hands and feet were tied up, and he could only wriggle on the ground like a caterpillar, making desperate sounds. The little spark of hope that had just ignited, before it could even start to burn, was mercilessly stamped out with a splat. Inside the city wall, the warriors behind watched eagerly as the first guy disappeared into the hole, just like the sheep before, and never came back. A raging fire of hope instantly ignited in their eyes, and they scrambled to jump into the hole. When the second guy reached out his hands from the vertical shaft outside the city, he was also grabbed by two enthusiastic hands. He thought it was the brother who had gone out first pulling him, and he shouted, "Thanks, bro." Then he also joined the binding play luxury package, of course, as the one being tied up. In the hole, hands reached out one after another. The people above also quickly pulled them up one by one. Ignoring the subsequent binding part, this scene of helping each other was simply so harmonious that it moved the heavens and the earth. Inside, the city wall, seeing so many people successfully escape from the hole, the warriors who were still watching no longer had any doubts. They urged the people in front to climb faster to make room for themselves. But the hole could only allow one person through at a time, and the efficiency was really low. More and more warriors gathered at the foot of the wall, and soon someone discovered another 9 identical holes. The warriors who had discovered the new continent couldn't wait to jump down. The result, as expected, was the same. No matter which hole they came out of, everyone was pulled up by 2 friendly hands, and gloriously became the free labor force of your tribe. Some people also felt that something was wrong with the atmosphere above when they were halfway up the climb. But the people behind were still urging them non-stop. "Hurry up, what are you waiting for?" Helplessly, they could only bite the bullet and reach out their hands and jump up. After being successfully pulled up by their friends, they immediately understood. Oh, so this was what was going on. No need to ask anymore. Your upgraded version of the leaving one side unblocked when besieging on 3 sides trap was a great success. The totem warriors in the city were all captured. The tribesmen who participated in the operation were in high spirits, and those who could count were already counting the number of people one by one. Just at this joyous post-war spoils sharing moment, suddenly, several high and resounding elephant roars came from the north. You stood on the city wall and looked up. Wow, Huishan and Ruru, as you had hoped, successfully invited those 2 adult Dinotheriums back for you. The captives on the ground, who were tied up like caterpillars, when they heard these familiar elephant roars, the hope that had just been extinguished flared up again with a whoosh. Reinforcements. Our reinforcements have come back with the mammoth beasts. Oh, unfortunately, reality always likes to pour cold water on hope. The Dinotheriums had indeed come, but beside them were 2 little followers from your tribe. The reinforcements had indeed arrived, but they were all tied up in a long line with hemp ropes, and were being marched along with their heads hanging low. When the caterpillars saw this spectacle, the little spark of hope that had just been rekindled in their hearts went out with a puff, leaving not even a trace of ash. Yuye and his group, who had just arrived from the north, were also stunned. Looking at the caterpillars wriggling all over the ground, they couldn't help but think, the chief's efficiency is simply off the charts. Their cavalry team had struggled to capture dozens of people, but here, the chief had managed to round up nearly 2,000 people all at once. The 2 sides met in victory. The 2 little guys, Huishan and Ruru, were the first to rush over, acting coquettishly and rolling around you, rubbing their noses against you non-stop, as if saying, "Boss, boss, look at us. We brought the big guys back. Praise us, praise us." The 2 adult Dinotheriums behind also slowly walked over and stretched out their long trunks, as if greeting you. Ruru excitedly circled around them, occasionally raising its head and letting out a few calls, as if it had found long-lost relatives. It seemed that these elephants had known each other before and had a good relationship. Seeing how close Huishan and Ruru were to you, the 2 big guys also let down their guard, knowing that you weren't a bad person. Yuya came over to report the situation. The process wasn't complicated. Following your order to pursue the remaining enemies, The enemies thought they were hiding well, but they forgot that their two-story buildings, the Dinotheriums, were really eye-catching, and their smell wafted all the way. The main focus of the task you gave was originally to capture the elephants, and capturing the people was just a bonus. As a result, Huishan and Ruru sniffed the air and thought, "Hey, the smell of fellow villagers." Then, they followed the smell and found the enemies. With a roar from Huishan, the two big guys on the other side immediately defected and came out on their own to recognize their kin. The position of the enemies was completely exposed. Yuye took the opportunity to lead the cavalry in a charge and easily dealt with them. How could dozens of barefoot people be a match for the fully armed cavalry? They couldn't run away and couldn't win in a fight. After cutting down the two leaders, the rest all surrendered obediently. The battle was basically over, and the only place without news was Dashu's side in Liuyang County. With a wave of your hand, Yuye, who had just taken a breath, was sent to Sitong County to give Dashu a hand and clear out the dark forest as soon as possible. As for the dozens of remaining soldiers and the two new pets that were captured, they were directly incorporated into the army of captives. You didn't stay in Fumigan for long. You tied the captives into a spectacular long line, led the two newly acquired big guys, and marched back to Hanyang City in grand style. Before leaving, you left Sietu in charge of blocking the tunnels. They must be blocked tightly. And Yingrui, in charge of rewarding the merits, counting the records of achievements, conferring titles of nobility when appropriate, and distributing land. 2 days later, the army of captives arrived outside Hanyang City. As you had ordered earlier, a simple captive camp had been set up outside the city with fences. More than 2,000 people were all locked up inside, and a team of militiamen was sent to guard them. In the city, the leaders of the several newly moved tribal alliances and Zhan Mao from the Nian tribe had really opened their eyes during this period. Hanyang City, your earliest effort, although not large, exuded the atmosphere of advanced civilization everywhere. It was simply a concentrated and exquisite advertisement of the strength of your tribe. During this period, the newly arrived tribesmen had experienced the extraordinariness of the Han tribe in terms of food, clothing, housing, and transportation. When it was hot, the old residents changed into refreshing linen clothes, while the newly arrived ones were still sweating in their animal skins. With a wave of your hand, linen was allocated from the warehouse, and the old ladies were arranged to teach the new wives how to make clothes hand in hand. The men weren't idle either. They followed the old residents to cut firewood, carry water, contribute farmyard manure, and work in the fields. Seeing the crops in the fields growing vigorously, they felt much more at ease. Nothing was more important than being able to fill their stomachs. Before, when they heard about the battle in the north, the new arrivals were a bit worried. But when they saw the old residents around them, even the little kids were eating and drinking as usual, as if nothing had happened. Their hanging hearts were finally put at ease. The environment really influenced people. A few days later, the good news from the front line came. All the enemies had been locked up. The new arrivals were still wondering what locked up meant. It wasn't until you came back with more than 2,000 captives that they were completely stunned, their jaws dropping to the ground. Zhan Mao felt the deepest. Thinking back when you lured away his people with just a few boats, he was really unwilling. I'm the chief of a tribe with 1,000 people. Why should I listen to you? But when he arrived in Hanyang City and saw the windmills, water wheels, iron smelting, and textile work, which were like magic, he was convinced. Then, when he saw you easily mobilize the migration of tens of thousands of people, he was completely cowed. His 1,000 or so people were probably just the icing on the cake for you. Did he want to be a bargaining chip? No way. Today, seeing these 2,000 living captives, Zhan Mao was completely prostrate with admiration. He had been a chief himself and knew very well what these 2,000 able-bodied men meant. How large a tribe would it take to field so many people? Moreover, You had actually captured them alive. Capturing them alive was much more difficult. Then killing them all, he asked himself. If he were given the same number of troops and magical weapons, he might be able to win the battle, but capture them all alive. He could only smile bitterly and shake his head. Hey, I can't do it. For how you managed to do it. Janmao couldn't figure it out no matter how hard he thought, and it felt like listening to something from another world. But you didn't plan to explain either. Let them guess. It was good to maintain a bit of mystery, which was conducive to maintaining your glorious and imposing image. After all, the unknown was what inspired the most awe, wasn't it? After the captive camp was stabilized, you gave the task of treating the captive's feet to the former chief of the snake tribe. They were professionals when it came to dealing with herbs. But when you thought about it at home, you always felt that something was missing. With so many slaves, there were already more than 3,000 of them, including this batch. They would all be laborers for infrastructure construction in the future, and they were also the most restless powder. Kegs, rules had to be established. After referring to advanced experience and combining it with the actual situation of the tribe, you promulgated the 3 measures for slave management. First, cut off the big toes. Can't run fast now, huh? Hey. Second, shave their heads. Hygiene first. It can prevent lice and avoid wasting labor if they get sick. Besides, it's easy to tell the difference between a bald head and someone with hair at a glance. Third, tattoo their faces. Tattoo a black slave character on their faces. Even if they put on shoes and grow their hair back, this official certification can't be denied. Technical support? It was readily available. The artists from the former Wen tribe were the best at this. Although you had guided them to stop, drawing randomly on their faces, after all, you didn't like it, and they had turned to artistic creation on pottery and fabric, they could still handle this old skill with ease. As time entered March, the rice was almost ripe. The pilot project of private property ownership in Hanyang City was about to be launched, and troubles also came. A large amount of money had to be in circulation, and there had to be scales. Without a measurement standard, how could future transactions be carried out? This was a big problem, so you plunged into the intense work of weighing instrument research and development again. If you want to make a scale, the first step is to set a standard weight. Weights. There was no way to do it before, as there was no suitable material. But now it's different. You're holding a bag of shiny gold sand in your hand. It was those pretty little stones that the tribesmen picked up by the river when they were harnessing the water. Who would have thought? They would come in very handy. Why use gold? Because it's lazy. Its chemical properties are extremely stable. Unlike copper and iron, it doesn't rust easily, gain or lose weight, which could affect its mass. Using it as a weight is reliable. Let's get to work. First, you made a simple balance. Then, according to the tribe's length standard, you made a clay measuring cup with scales, which was used to measure water. Then it was time to play with water. Based on the volume-to-weight ratio of water at room temperature, 1 cubic decimeter of water. 1 kilogram, you were familiar with this. You accurately measured the weights of water with different volumes. Put a fixed amount of water on one side of the balance and carefully add the gold sand to the other side until both sides are in balance. Done. Collect the gold sand corresponding to that weight and melt it into individual gold lumps. A set of golden and weighty standard weight gold weights was born in your hands. With the weights ready, it was time to make the scale. This was another problem. The modern pressure scale where the pointer Bu moves or the numbers jump, it's advanced, convenient. But, not to mention the high cost, the key is that you have no idea what the principle behind it is. Have you studied it? Not at all. Well, let's be honest and go for the retro style. Just make that kind of old-fashioned scale pole that has basically been phased out, the balance scale. This old antique has almost zero technical content. It's just the lever principle from junior high school physics. With the fulcrum unchanged, the longer the force arm, the more labor-saving it is. Got it? For the current scientific and technological level of your tribe, it's just a piece of cake. The key is that the scale pole has to be sturdy. You have to choose a hard wood that doesn't deform easily. Otherwise, after using it for a long time, the scale pole will bend under the weight, and then it won't be accurate. You must find a material that is unyielding. With the spirit of a guinea pig, you selected Chinese fir, oak, and the spikes of the man-eating tree that you had captured. Before, this thing is really hard, and made several samples of each, planning to test which one was the most durable and sturdy. Shape the selected wood into a suitable smooth and thin cylindrical shape. Wrap the two ends of the scale pole with copper sheets to prevent cracking. Wear. Then drill holes and install bronze hooks for hanging things and square lifting rings for carrying by hand. Finally, tie strong ropes to these places and hang a standard 1 jin, half a kilogram, cast iron counterweight. After the parts are assembled, the most crucial step comes next, marking the scales. This isn't difficult either. First, hang a 1 jin, weight on the hook side, and then move the counterweight left and right on the scale pole until the scale pole is in balance. Okay, make a mark at this position. This is the point for 1 jin. Then replace it with a 20 jin weight. Pull the counterweight outward until it is balanced again, and mark the 20 jin position. After the two key points are determined, take out a ruler and a compass and accurately divide the distance between 1 jin and 20 jin into 19 equal parts, which respectively represent 2 to 20 jin. As for the distance between 1 jin and 0, just calculate it forward according to the length that each jin occupies on the scale pole. After marking the major scales, divide the distance between each jin into 10 equal parts, and each part represents 1 liang, 50 grams. The system of measurement must be the decimal system that you are most familiar with. 1 liang is 50 grams, and 1 jin is 500 grams, exactly half a kilogram. It's still the familiar formula and the familiar taste, but this isn't over yet. The high day counterweight rubs against the scale pole all the time, and the scales are likely to wear off over time. What to do? The ancients had a clever solution. Make marks. Use wear-resistant metal points to mark the scales. You also decisively adopted this method, and the technology was readily available. Metal wire drawing. First, draw the copper block into a thin copper wire with a diameter of about 1 millimeter. Use a small hand drill to drill small holes on the scale lines of the scale pole. Dip the copper wire in glue and carefully insert it in. Finally, use a sharp knife to cut off the excess copper wire, and then use the back of the knife to flatten and press the end of the copper wire. In this way, shiny and wear-resistant copper point marks are left on the scale pole. A handheld balance scale that can weigh a minimum of 1 liang, 50 grams, and a maximum of 20 jin, 10 kilograms, is freshly made. With the first standard scale, you can start mass-producing copies of it. However, this small scale doesn't have much use. For now, after all, there are almost no private transactions within the tribe. What your tribe urgently needs now is a large weighing instrument that can weigh hundreds of jin or even heavier things. It's needed for the public to collect taxes and count the warehouse inventory. But this is just a minor issue. The real headache for you is another discovery. In the future, when collecting grain taxes, it must not be calculated by weight. Why? You remembered a key point. The newly harvested grain is wet and extremely heavy. It's at least twice as heavy as the dried grain. If someone brings in the grain for tax payment without drying it, there will be too much moisture in the sea. Wait. This isn't just a matter of tax evasion. More seriously, grain with a high moisture content can't be stored for a long time at all. If it's packed wet into bags and piled in the warehouse, it will become moldy and spoiled before long. Not only will it go bad on its own, but it will also contaminate the dry grain next to it. If such a thing really happens, it will be a disaster for your tribe's grain reserves. No way. It must be changed. In the future, when collecting grain taxes, it will be calculated by volume uniformly. No matter whether the grain handed in by the common people is dried or not, The officials in charge of storage must dry it thoroughly again to ensure it's completely dry before it can be put into storage. Safety first. Correspondingly, tools for measuring the volume of grain must be made as soon as possible. Sheng and do. The unit of sheng follows the old rule, 1,000 cubic centimeters, that is 1 cubic decimeter. As for do, you set it as 125 sheng dice. You designed the dao as a wooden container with a wide top and a narrow bottom, shaped like a pyramid with the top cut off. It is assembled from 4 trapezoidal wooden boards, with the large opening facing upward and the small opening facing downward. A pull-out iron plate is installed at the smallest opening at the bottom, and it also needs to be used with a special wooden shelf for placing the dao. When calculating the grain, first insert the iron plate at the bottom tightly, and then pour the grain in from the top and fill it up and level it off. When it needs to be bagged, just put a sack underneath and pull out the iron plate at the bottom with a swish, and the grain will automatically leak into the bag. It's convenient and quick. It's simply a large funnel. Well, the 2 major measurement problems of weight and volume have been solved. Next, even more headache-inducing things come up. One is the issue of currency reserves. You need money to make the private ownership system work. The other is even more crucial, pricing of goods. This thing is really complicated. It's related to the entire tribe's economic foundation and social stability. If it's not done well, it will be a disaster. You don't dare to be careless. You start scratching your head and racking your brains to think about this hot potato. You also have to predict various possible pitfalls in the future and the corresponding solutions. Why, head hurts. Regarding pricing, you considered the gold standard and the silver standard, but after research, they weren't suitable for here. The Han tribe now urgently needs the commodity standard. Plainly speaking, the currency issuance volume has to follow the value of actual goods. Productivity equals currency value, an ironclad rule. Based on physical goods, issue currency in corresponding multiples. For example, you're currently considering exchanging grains and cloth for equivalent currency? Since there is no currency in circulation in the Han tribe yet, how can we make people get used to using this thing? Here's your plan. First, let's talk about distribution. There are 2 channels. 1, pay salaries in currency, replacing the previous system of distributing grains and clothing. 2, use currency to purchase raw materials, grains, and labor. Promoting. Currency may seem difficult, but for the emerging civilization of the Han tribe, it's a great convenience. Why? The government has a monopoly on all manufacturing industries. There are no privately run workshops at all. If the common people want to obtain some daily necessities, they can only turn to the government. With this premise, it's easy. All workshops will transform from tribal public ownership to national ownership. In modern terms, they will become state-owned enterprises. Textile mills, metallurgical plants, ceramics, carbon production, ink production, paper making, printing, animal husbandry, woodworking, oil extraction, salt mines, iron mines, a large number of them. These workshops have a large number of workers. In the past, everything from food and clothing to housing and transportation was distributed by the tribe. Now it's different. Property has been privatized. The tribe no longer distributes physical goods but pays salaries instead. This measure is highly effective and can quickly spread currency to every corner of the Han tribe. Next, let's talk about purchasing raw materials. Mineral resources belong to the state and don't require payment. But for other raw materials, we need to purchase them. For example, in woodworking, for all tools, furniture, vehicles, ships, and military equipment, wood is needed. In the past, the wood for the woodworking workshops was cut by the tribe organizing manpower. In addition to getting some daily necessities, there was nothing else. Everyone worked purely because they were part of the tribe, an obligation. Disobey? No food. Now it's different. The source of wood is either cut by state Owned enterprise slaves are bought from private individuals, the people in the previous logging team have changed from working for the tribe to working for themselves. After finishing farm work, they go up the mountain to cut trees and sell them to the woodworking factory to earn some pocket money. Take oil extraction as an example. Soybean oil, peanut oil, tung oil, lacquer seed oil for making printing ink. In the past, the tribe arranged for people to plant and harvest them, which was also an assigned task, obligatory labor. Now that land has been privatized, the public sector doesn't directly engage in farming. If it wants to extract oil, apart from collecting some taxes, it has to buy from private individuals. For example, if you have surplus beans from your own supplementary field, sell them to the state-owned oil extracting enterprise. After the oil is extracted, buy it with money. Things like tung seeds are picked by the common people themselves and purchased by state-owned enterprises. There's also the textile industry, woolen cloth and linen. Silk is still in its infancy. The wool for woolen cloth mainly comes from foreign trade, and the hemp fiber for linen will only be available for purchase from private individuals in the future, and the soon-to-be popular silk will all be obtained from the supplementary fields of women. The pulp for papermaking has also changed to a model where it is collected by the public and purchased by state-owned enterprises. The last type is the purchase of labor. This doesn't refer to the workers in state-owned factories, but to the temporary workers serving public projects. This is linked to the corvée policy. The initially determined taxes in the Han tribe include grain tax, poll tax, and business tax, collectively referred to as money tax, and all are tangible and real things. The other is to perform corvée labor, twice a year during the slack farming seasons. Every household has to send someone to work for the tribe for free. You think this won't work. Assigned tasks result in low enthusiasm and low work efficiency. Moreover, each household has different circumstances, and it can't be guaranteed that every household can send someone. Tearing families apart for the sake of corvée labor is not worth it. It's easy to arouse public resentment. So you decided that in the future for public project construction, corvée labor will be abolished. For families that really can't spare anyone, they can directly pay money to offset the corvée. The same goes for others. When workers are needed, the government will publicly recruit. During the construction period, all workers will be paid, which is actually part of the tax they paid to offset the corvée. It's a sleight of hand trick, but the nature has changed. One is working for the public for free, and the other is working for the public and still being able to make money in the end. You can make money by working for the public. This not only takes care of families that can't spare manpower, but also solves the problems of negative work attitudes and low work efficiency during corvée labor. As long as the people below seriously implement these policies, it won't be long before everyone in the Han tribe starts using currency. There are distribution channels, and of course there must be recycling channels. Currency only has value when it circulates. As the largest factory owner in the Han tribe, you're not afraid at all that the common people won't spend money, unless they produce everything themselves. Otherwise, they have to buy our products. Once the common people have money in their hands, you issue another government decree. When shopping in state-owned enterprises, currency must be used. In this way, the coins of the Han tribe will truly start to circulate, although it's just a simple circulation of the government issuing money and then the money returning to the government. As long as the money is in circulation, all those who handle it can benefit. When the common people have money, they will definitely save it or buy some private property that they couldn't even dream of before. Through large-scale money circulation, the government can also accumulate a lot of savings. After formalization, it can start collecting taxes and use the tax revenue to better develop the tribe. This matter is of great significance both to the living standards of the common people and to the development of the Han tribe. After these matters are settled, the last problem is the pricing of goods. Guided by the principle of the commodity standard, the issuance volume and purchasing power of the currency must be linked to physical goods. And the representatives of these physical goods are naturally the three essentials for human survival: grains, cloth, and white salt. Once the official price of grains is set, the prices of other goods can be calculated, and this applies to cloth and white salt as well. According to the currency system and actual productivity of the Han tribe, how should the price of grains be set? First of all, we need to consider the conversion between the grain unit and the currency to avoid troubles during transactions. For example, if one wen can buy 1 jin of rice, but a person can't finish 1 jin of rice in one meal. If you go to a restaurant and have a big bowl of rice, which is about 1.5 jin, paying 1 wen is obviously a loss. Even if you add the cost of firewood and service fees, it shouldn't be 4 times the price, right? Then who would go to a restaurant to eat? Isn't it better to cook by yourself? Besides, the smallest denomination of the currency in the Han tribe is 1 wen. How can the seller give change? There's no way to conduct the transaction. So when setting the price, we must consider the minimum value of a single item. For the smallest units such as sesame seed cakes, rice, porridge, and eggs, the buyer should be able to pay with the exact amount of currency, and the seller should also be able to give change. Finally, you set the prices for grains. Shelled rice is priced at 10 wen per jin. Unhusked rice is 8 wen per jin. Corn kernels are also 8 wen per jin, because corn has a high yield. Soybeans are 15 wen per jin. Peanuts are 20 wen per jin. Unhusked wheat is 15 wen per jin. Shelled wheat grains are 18 wen per jin, and flour is 20 wen per jin. The main grain crop in the Han tribe is rice, followed by corn and then wheat. The yield of wheat has always been low, and people have little interest in growing it. After corn came into view, they found that for the same size of land, the yield of corn is much higher than that of wheat, so their interest in growing wheat is even lower. Therefore, the planting amount of wheat is scarce, and it is mainly cultivated and domesticated scientifically, and has not been widely popularized. The inventory of wheat is small, and things are precious because of their scarcity, so the price is set so high. Why are there different prices for rice and wheat, with and without the husk? Because the agricultural tax you stipulated requires the payment of unhusked grains. Unhusked grains can be stored for a longer time than bare rice. From your past life experience, most of the grains in the warehouse are unhusked, and the processed refined rice is a commodity for sale. The unhusked grains in the warehouse are the National Strategic Grain Reserves, which are for emergency use, and everything is aimed at a longer storage time. The price of these grains is neither too high nor too low. Basically, the bottom price of 1 jin of grain is around 10 wen. For a bowl of rice, you can pay 3 to 5 wen for the transaction, including the cost of grains, fuel, and service fees. By controlling the price within a few wen, both the buyer and the seller can give and receive change, and it won't be the case that they can't afford it or can't make change. With the price standard of grains, the prices of other goods can be calculated based on grains. Take cloth as an example. First, calculate how much raw material is needed per square meter. Work out the cost of raw materials, and then add the labor cost. Now, a female textile worker in the Han tribe can weave a piece of cloth that is 2 meters wide and 10 meters long per day. The labor cost should first ensure that she can have 3 full meals a day, and there should be some extra money for family expenses. Calculated as half of a person's food cost, then the daily wage of this person should be enough for her to have 5 meals. Then add the cost of raw materials and labor costs, and then add a certain profit, and this is the ex-factory price of the cloth. In the subsequent retail link, the transportation cost, inventory cost, store rent, employee cost, and the retailer's profit should be added on this basis, and finally, the retail price is obtained. This price is not set by you, but by the market itself. Affected by the environment and weather, the price of raw materials will definitely fluctuate. The workers' wages remain the same, but the retail points are at different distances from the manufacturer, resulting in different transportation costs. The farther away from the source of goods, the higher the retail price, which is an ironclad rule. The same principle applies to other goods. For the salt production industry, calculate the labor cost of workers, add the transportation cost, divide by the output, and then add a part of the profit to finally get the retail price. The most crucial thing is that there is a standard for workers' wages, which can be directly measured by the price of grains. How much grain a person needs to eat per day is a fixed amount. Give enough food, and then adjust it by different amplitudes according to the type of work, so that the workers can save some spare money after meeting their own needs, and then the wage amount is determined. Take pork as an example. You don't know the ancient farming model, but you have heard something about modern farming. Coarse grains like corn are beneficial to health if eaten once a week. Of course, eating it every day won't kill you, but it's just hard to chew, and the nutrition is definitely not as high as that of refined grains. But in modern times, corn is generally used as pig feed. It is said that for a pig fed with corn, 3 gin of corn can produce 1 gin of pork. Then set the price of meat according to this standard. 1 gin of meat is equivalent to 3 gin of corn, that is, 24 wen. Then add some profit and other costs, and the price of each gin of meat is about 40 wen. The minimum standard for a worker's 3 meals a day is 5 bowls of rice, which is about 20 to 30 wen. Plus half a gin of meat, that's about 50 wen per day. Add some vegetables and it's about 60 to 70 wen. Add a little more for supporting the family, and at most it's 1 yuan. The monthly salary is about 30 yuan. The overall wage level is similar to that of China in the 1970s and 1980s, and this can be regarded as a well-off family. Those farmers who don't work in factories rely entirely on self-sufficiency, eating the grains and vegetables grown in the fields, and using the surplus grains to raise pigs, which can also be sold to increase income. If they do well, they can also save a lot of money, and they are not much worse than the working class. The above is just the average wage line. Due to different industries, positions, and work difficulties, the wages can't be the same. But with the price of grains as a basic reference, the value of all other goods can be measured according to this. Then there is the change in the price of grains. You can't set the price of grains rigidly. You also need to leave some profit space for merchants. But this space must not be large. The officials should do everything possible to prevent merchants from driving up the price of grains and hoarding goods for speculation, especially in years of disaster. Take rice as an example. You have set a minimum red line. The minimum price of shelled rice cannot be lower than 8 wen. If the price of grains is too low, it will hurt the farmers. If the grains are too cheap, the farmers can't make a living. If there is a bumper harvest, and there is an unusually large amount of grains, even if private merchants reduce the purchase price, the government will not allow it. The government will purchase all the grains at a price of at least 8 wen per gin, buying as much as there is, and forcefully rescue the market to raise the price of grains. In addition, there is a maximum standard. The maximum price of each gin of shelled rice cannot exceed 14 wen. If there is a year of disaster, such as drought or flood causing a reduction in grain production, and the common people don't have enough food, and the grains on the market are hoarded, and the price is raised by merchants, the government should release the grains stored usually and sell them on the market at this maximum standard, selling as much as it has, and must drive the price down so that those merchants don't dare to raise the price. Merchants who disrupt the market order, especially those who make a fortune during disasters by speculating on grains, should be severely punished by law. Once caught, they should be sentenced to death without mercy. In order to prevent the phenomenon of panic buying and merchants bulk purchasing in years of disaster, when the government sells grains at a fair price, real name authentication should be carried out, and the supply should be limited in time and quantity. Limit the purchase quantity per person per day to prevent merchants from purchasing in large quantities and then continuing to disrupt the market. The matter of pricing has come to a temporary and what remains is the issue of currency reserves. The Han tribe currently has only 1 mint in Hanyang City. Although there are wind-powered die-casting machines, it is still quite difficult to produce enough currency for tens of thousands of people to trade. So another thing to mention is the transformation of the metallurgical workshops in the Han tribe.